Most people think they know what it's like to struggle in a sport. You miss a shot in basketball, but so what? You just missed. Or you strike out in baseball. A bit embarrassing, but you just go sit down on the bench until it's your turn again. But when you miss in Jiu Jitsu, you get crushed, physically dominated by another human being, sometimes half your size, sometimes twice your size. Your ego gets bruised along with your ribs. It tests your mind and your dignity. And you feel like you're drowning in failure every single week. And that's why Jiu Jitsu feels impossible in the beginning. And why so many people quit before they ever see what's waiting for them on the other side. And that's what we're talking about today. Why Jiu Jitsu feels so much harder than other sports. And why that struggle is the entire point. Welcome to the Alchemy of Struggle, baby. In Jiu Jitsu, losing isn't abstract. It's very real, very physical. Someone is on top of you, crushing you with their chest, bending your arm to the point where you have no choice but to tap. Someone smaller than you, controlling you like a child. That visceral feedback goes a lot deeper than just embarrassment. It hits your survival wiring. Your nervous system doesn't care that it's just training. It reacts as if you are in real danger. And then there's the close contact. Grappling forces extreme closeness that most adults never experience. Strangers, chest to chest, breathing and sweating in each other's faces. And for much smaller people, it can feel even more overwhelming. And for women, it often brings awkwardness and a lot of misunderstanding. Even outside the gym, things are a little bit weird. Having to convince coworkers that everything's okay at home, despite all the bruising on your arms. I remember hearing this story once of a couple who trains Jiu Jitsu together. They were at a store standing in line, and the people kept glaring at the guy like they had daggers in their eyes, because her arms were covered in bruises from Jiu Jitsu, and she even had a small shiner under one of her eyes. And it's pretty obvious what they were thinking. Here's a guy who beats up his girlfriend. And it's not like they could pull everyone aside and explain to them, no, these are just bruises from Jiu Jitsu. And then there's that endless phase of sucking in Jiu Jitsu. Because progress in Jiu Jitsu is so difficult to measure. You can show up 3 or 4 times a week for several months and still feel like you're drowning. Submissions fail, escapes don't work, and you're constantly gassed out. And here's the real kicker. This is when you know the universe has a sense of humor. As you get better, so do your training partners, which makes your improvement feel even more invisible. And so it's easy to believe, I just suck at this. And that invisible progress is why so many people quit before the breakthrough. And for those in their 40s and their 50s, this is all amplified. Because recovery is much slower, joints ache much longer, and the gas tank is much smaller. And even the ego sting is a lot sharper. Because in your daily life outside of Jiu Jitsu, you're used to being competent. A lawyer who fights for its clients. A nurse or a doctor who saves lives. A programmer who is so gifted with code that he makes computer hardware dance. Or a construction worker, responsible for the safe structures that many of us take for granted. And then you show up to Jiu Jitsu, and some skinny little white belt twists you into a pretzel without breaking a sweat. But here's the key. That difficulty isn't just punishment. It's shaping you in ways you won't see unless you stick around long enough. One of the beauties of Jiu Jitsu is that it strips away illusions. You can't fake toughness when someone's smashing you. You can't hide behind talk or ego. It's humility in motion. And that repeated exposure to failure is what refines you. Forces you to develop real composure under fire. Every time you get tapped, it's a reminder that you're not untouchable. And that type of humility is rare in adult life, where most of us avoid situations that would make us look bad. But Jiu Jitsu doesn't let you hide. It makes humility a constant training partner. Just when I start to think a little bit too highly of myself, someone shows up and puts my ass in check. And there have been many times I've been sitting on the sidelines, thinking to myself, you still got a lot of work to do, buddy. Where else in life can you have a conversation more honest than the ones that you have on those jiu-jitsu mats every single week? And for older grapplers especially, the very thing that makes jiu-jitsu harder also makes it more valuable. Slower recovery forces you to train smarter. Nagging injuries lead to increased efficiency. And limited athleticism forces you to focus on technique. It's brutal, but it's also a filter. And if you stick to it, you come out sharper, more resilient, and more precise. And over time, you learn to handle that pressure and the anxiety. And that shift follows you off the mats, whether at work or at home. You learn to stop panicking in tense situations because you've trained yourself not to. So yes, jiu-jitsu is brutally hard, but hard is what forges the change. The real question becomes, how do you survive the storm long enough to see the payoff? Well, the first thing you have to do is to shrink the battlefield. Stop trying to win at jiu-jitsu, especially in the early days. Instead of thinking, I need to tap less, start thinking to yourself, I need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. There's a seduction to telling yourself to tap less. It has the illusion of progress and can trick you into thinking defense equals winning. But the real progress is learning to lose with composure. And progress is about micro measurements, so small that only you can see them. Next, you need to learn to redefine success early on. Grade yourself on attempts, on clarity, on calmness under pressure. For example, I got armbarred, but I stayed calm and I saw it coming sooner. I got my ass kicked, but even the best guys get their asses kicked. And I'm beginning to understand that it's just part of the process. The next thing is to anchor to identity, not outcome. You're not just trying jiu-jitsu, you're a grappler now. And grapplers get smashed. Learn from the experience and keep showing up. And you need to accept the fact that you'll never catch that 20-year-old blue belt. Not in recovery speed, not in explosiveness, and not in free time. But you can surpass them in craft, patience, and resilience. When I encounter a young, aggressive blue belt, I frustrate them with defense, surprise them with a sweep, and then finish it. Not because I'm superior or special, but because years of patience and timing lets me see openings that they miss. So remember that you don't have to survive jiu-jitsu by muscling through it, or by pretending that it's easy. It isn't. You survive by shrinking the battlefield, redefining success, and anchoring to who you are becoming. Because struggle isn't a detour in jiu-jitsu. The struggle is jiu-jitsu. Now I know someone is watching this saying, this just sounds like a fancy way of telling someone to be a good loser. Why keep showing up if you just keep getting beat down? And I'm not going to pretend that winning doesn't matter. It does, but only after you've learned how to actually use jiu-jitsu to win. If you only chase wins, you'll never enter those uncomfortable positions where real growth happens. You don't want to be the guy who wins all the time in the gym, but never stretches themselves. They eventually just plateau, look good for a season, but then 5 years later, they're doing the same old stuff. Now I know someone else is saying, look, I'm much older and I don't have 10 years to struggle through it. Why not focus on what actually gets me wins right now? But that's exactly why you can't skip the struggle. At 40 or 50 plus, you will never out-athlete the 20-year-olds. Trying to shortcut your way to winning by muscling through things or explosiveness is what breaks bodies. What does scale with age? Craft, timing, pressure, efficiency. These only come from deliberately spending time in the suck. So if you embrace the long game approach now, you'll still be rolling at 60, 65, 70 years old. But if you shortcut it for quick wins, you'll end up retired, not promoted. And if you can endure being humbled, bruised, and dominated long enough, that's when things finally open up and you grow into a true martial artist. And if you haven't seen it already, check out the video on this channel that discusses why habits are more important than discipline. It'll be linked at the end of this video. And if any of this hit home, check out some of the free stuff in the description. Or if you want to go deeper, join the channel membership. You get early access to new videos, a monthly digest with key takeaways from that month's content, and an opportunity to go deeper as we build this community of older grapplers. And as always, I want to thank the members, the subscribers, and the commenters for helping me level up this content. But remember, there are others who need this message, and they're probably in your own gyms. So let's help them find it. Like, share, and subscribe. Keep up the good fight and stay safe on those mats. Peace.